All right, so the goose bought it. But that's the way he always came at the world.
Off it.
Max, you'd be the first to admit it was long overdue. All right, I'll tell you how it is. You're a winner, Max. You're on the top shelf. And I'm not going to lose you because of some crazy notion about quitting. They say people don't believe in heroes anymore. Well, damn them. You and me, Max. We're going to give them back to heroes.
You really expect me to go for that crap?
You gotta admit, I sounded good there for a minute, huh?
Hello, listening people.
Hello.
Well, Bartek's already breaking. Hello was funny enough. Do I need to say any more? I think I don't, because that was so hilarious. That
Dude,
Bartek
if you tell the listening people what they're listening to right now, I think I'll lose it.
Wow. Well, guys, goodbye. It was great doing this show.
Thank God I didn't lose it. I thought you were going to say something like, you're listening to Spit and Polish Presents. I'm Ryan Slawinski.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Slawinski, and that's Bartek over there. Has a last name, not just like Madonna, where they're the singular name. I actually said to somebody recently that although we're both Polish and that my last name's hard for normal people, I have a hard time pronouncing your last name. And then somebody said, Bartek has a last name? We never hear it on the pod. And I'm like, there's a reason. He's Mr. K.
And yet, when you Google it, it's just written right there.
It is written right there. But
no pronunciation guide. Who needs it?
Yeah, so how is it pronounced, your name? And also, how is it mentally? How's your name going?
Let's break it down into syllables. The first one is cusp, like you're on the cusp of whatever cusp means.
Yeah.
And then the next one is shit, like you're saying shit, but without the T. Mm-hmm. And the last one is shuck, like, oh, shucks.
Okay.
So cusp, shuck.
Oh, there you go. And it sounds like an old soothsayer curse.
Cusp, shuck, cusp, shuck.
But we are obviously spitting Polish, likingly, because we are always spitting. And we're spitting young gentlemen, and we both happen to be Polish. That's it. That's what we call a thinking person's joke.
Yeah, it's like two meanings.
Yeah, it's a double entendre, as the French would say. Double entendre. I came first in French in my year, so I know how to speak the language. Not Polish though. Go back to the old days where I have to let people know that. But enough of that horseplay. Let's get into the main play of out of pet play. Now let's get into main play of our show, Pictures Powwow, in which one of us recommends a movie in the week. We watch that said film, come back and talk about it. I recommended the film that we're doing today. It's called Mad Max. You may have heard of it once or twice before.
Oh, yeah.
And that is my recommendation that I gave. And then the next episode will be you, the listening people. And the one after that, it will be Bartek. That's our cycle of things. That's right. You can recommend a movie. It's not just Bartek and myself, but you'll have to wait to the end of the episode to recommend a movie. You're going to have to keep your mouth shut. Okay? Keep quiet. I don't want to hear your recommendations until the end, because you know who's talking? Bartek right now. He's about to say his history with Mad Max.
Yeah. My history with Mad Max is that once upon a time, I was given a copy of Mad Max on DVD.
By who?
Mama. What's so funny, Ryan?
Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Nothing at all.
Yes.
Is that how you say mum in Polish? Mama.
Mama, mamo. Yeah.
Mama. No, say it like the baby you did before. That's the accent.
Mama. There is a sort of baby in this film. Yep. So anyway, my mama gave me this R-rated film, and I watched it, and it was a good time. And I have not seen it since, and that was probably late 2000s. So this was a revisit for me.
How old were you when you saw it?
I would say that I was 14 or 15.
Okay, so under 18.
Yes, and it was an R-rated film.
Your mum's irresponsible. I'm just going to say it right now. How dare she?
Do you want to tell her that in person?
Yeah, if she's brave enough to come on the pod. I'll say it right here. Right here.
Uh-oh.
Bartek's mama You're irresponsible showing this boy an R-rated movie before he's ready.
Hey, she didn't show me the film. She just gave me the DVD.
Oh, so she gave you the fireworks all to yourself and
Yes.
didn't even stay around to see you burn your fingers.
She didn't put it in a DVD player or PS2 or whatever and then press play. She just gave me the DVD and walked away.
And winked and said, you know what to do. And then winked and walked away. And then you lit the firecracker and burned yourself. It was great. Okay, interesting. And you have not seen any other Mad Max film, or have you?
I've only seen Fury Road after this one. Oh, yeah.
So you did have some passing knowledge when you went into Fury Road of the Mad Max cinematic universe.
Yes.
Do you think, just random side question, was it beneficial? Did that help you when you watched Fury Road, do you think, to understand the world given to you in a previous one? Or do you think after all this time that it didn't really, like the Mad Max Fury Road kind of works on its own merits?
I think it had been quite a bit of time between the two, so maybe it didn't really influence me all that much. But considering that in that film, Mad Max wasn't quite the main character and we didn't get too much of him, probably would have been nice to...
You mean like in every Mad Max movie, he's kind of not the main character and he's kind of in the movie
Well, when
things happen at him,
Well, when I
like
walk,
in this one?
Well, when I walk into Fury Road, I didn't know that was like the big thing of the franchise.
The film opens up with him, Fury Road, giving his narration and eating a lizard and giving you his backstory, which we see unfold in this movie.
Okay, well, do you remember if the backstory in Fury Road was pretty accurate to this one?
I mean, it's as accurate as the continuity in these movies are. The continuity's crazy in these movies, okay? Like, let's not forget that Toe Cutter also played a Morton Joe. There's just some things in these. The most continuity you get in the Mad Max movies is Max's injuries. So in the second film, he has a leg brace on from where he got shot in this movie, and also some stuff on his arm for when he also got his arm run over in this movie. And then I think in the second movie, he gets his eye fucked up or something or other. And then in the third movie, his eyes, so because George Miller, and we'll get into this, he was a emergency room medical doctor guy. So a lot of the injuries in the movie are very accurate to the best of the abilities that he could. So the Mad Max movies come from George Miller seeing horrific things on a daily basis and saying, I could apply these in a movie. So the continuity is what they are, but I was just curious. So do you remember what it was like watching that first Mad Max movie? Were you aware when your mama gave you that DVD? Were you even aware of the Mad Max films? Were you aware of their legacy? Were you aware of what they were at all? Or was this yet another one of those instances where you got what is considered a classic and you were unaware of what it was?
I definitely knew the name and that it was a big deal, but I didn't know too much more beyond that. I just knew also that this was a very classic Australian film, big thing for Mel Gibson's filmography. And the DVD itself was like a special edition with like a little booklet and like a special cover that was like, all around it was talking about like, this is the greatest Australian film ever. It was the most profitable film until something else.
Blair Witch Project.
That's it, Blair Witch, yeah.
Okay, so you knew the name, but you kind of didn't know too much. Like, you didn't know about it being this kind of post-apocalyptic inspiration child for the genre.
It has been a while, so I can't say for sure, but I think I would have known about the post-apocalypse part and the fact that vehicles are a big thing.
Okay, so my history is I've watched these movies, I don't know how many times. They were just always kind of on. Yeah. Each one of them 3 times.
Yep.
To match the number in the trilogy, and then Fury Road fucked it up. So I have to now watch them one more time each. The other ones.
Watch Fury Road, then the first one, then Fury Road again, second one, Fury Road again, third one.
That's how you
4
do
times
it.
each.
That's how you do it. I was just gonna go the like this one, second one, third one, Fury Road, 111, and then just keep doing them like that to drive myself crazy. But I grew up with these. They've always been around. I knew of just by growing up with them and growing up in Australia, the Mad Max movies have their mark here, and they are a successful film franchise that came from us, and it helped launch the career of one of the big movie stars who, obviously, we all know Mel Gibson has his problems. We all know about Mel Gibson's issues, but let's not deny the fact he was a megastar at one point, and so these movies helped that in large ways, as well as George Miller is a very prolific director. He has been a very interesting one to look at in his filmography. He will do these movies, but then will do Happy Feet. And then go back to the Mad Max movies. So he is very interesting. He did Babe, I do believe, right? That was his movie as well, I'm pretty sure. At least he was involved in Babe. So he goes around the place. And also he did one of our movies that we've previously covered on the show. Do you remember what George Miller movie we've done on this show?
Oh, God, we have done something, haven't we? What was it?
Well, let me give you a clue.
Okay.
John Peters produced it. The famous producer that we love so much. And he saw this movie and said, oh, wouldn't it be cool, George Miller, if we put aliens in it? And George said, no, this is a movie about the devil with Jack Nicholson called The Witches of Eastwick.
Right.
And so...
he directed that?
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, I forgot all about that.
Yeah, because you can't tell it's George Miller because he's in the studio machine at that point. But... I grew up with these movies. The Mad Max movies are iconic to me. I would say that the one I remember the most is honestly Beyond Thunderdome because it's the one with the most lines of dialogue and the most bombastic set pieces. Tina Turner is great in that movie. It's not a good movie. It's kind of annoying. There comes a point where the movie it just drops off a cliff. Mm-hmm. But it's a fascinating one nonetheless, and it has memorable lines in it, such as 2 men enter, 1 man leave. That's in reference to the Thunderdome, and there's many other things. But the first movie is what we're talking about today, and I like the first Mad Max movie. I think it's very underrated because everybody wants him already in the deep post-apocalyptic world where he barely says lines of dialogue and he's just this badass guy with a car. And in the first movie... he's not that yet, but he becomes that along the way.
Yeah, and the world isn't that yet.
It is
quite.
On the way to being that. And I find it so cute. I don't know if you read any trivia, but one of the pieces of trivia was George Miller did not conceive of this being a post-apocalyptic world. That just came from budgetary things. And then they just kind of leaned into it after a little bit of time. And then the sequels just really committed to the bit.
I forgot to read the trivia, so if you got any more,
there's so
lay it on
much
me.
trivia.
Oh, wow.
What was your experience revisiting Mad Max?
The thing I always remember from my first experience is that I walked out from it and I thought like, oh, wow, that film was way too short. Like for some reason, that in that first viewing, it must have just flown right by for me. So like last night, before I watched, the film for this podcast, I had a look at the runtime just to make sure, and sure enough, it was a full 89 minutes. So
yeah,
maybe that's a testament to my viewing experience that first time, that maybe I liked it so much that it just zoomed by. I didn't remember too much about it, just like little visual things. So it was nice to revisit. It almost felt fresh to me.
Yeah.
Other than, I guess, the climax, which that seems to be what most people remember.
That's what you're there for.
Yeah.
When he goes mad.
Where he goes very mad. Sad and mad. It could have been Sad Max or Sad Sax. I don't know.
Get out.
Okay.
Bartek's gone, and now it's just me hosting it on my own. I love the movie. Oh, good. Did you, Ryan? Good job. Oh my God, Bartek's back, and he's mad.
Yes, I was sad when I was out there, but now that I'm back, I'm mad.
Yeah.
And watching it again last night, it was really interesting to revisit because I did remember all of those little general things. Like I obviously knew that this was a franchise known for being, super post-apocalyptic, very rusty in a lot of its aesthetics, things like that. And I did remember this film didn't quite reach that yet, and it really was interesting to see just how together everything was.
Yeah. There was a police force.
There was a police force. Their vehicles looked a bit, colourful, beat up.
Mm-hmm. Well, they were old police cars. They were real old police cars.
They were, yeah. And I remember years ago, like when I asked, like, "Oh, so is this franchise actually post-apocalyptic?" Because I've seen the first one; it didn't seem that way. And you told me the reason it was because of a petrol thing or something like that.
In the sequel, in the second one, they really go into the fact that there's an oil crisis and things kind of spiral out, and then nuclear war and stuff kind of goes on from there.
And that notion, I think, was kind of evident late in the film where you see them like trying to steal petrol from that huge tanker. So it's like, oh, okay, they're showing a little bit there. Beginning of the film says, this is a few years in the future. So it's like, oh, it's kind of believable that this is, just a little bit worse than what 1979 would have been. Or, that's the year this film came out, right? 79?
Somewhere in the 70s. But
somewhere in the 70s.
Yeah. So how did you feel about it, though? So you remembered it being short the first time, which is very funny because I always remember this film being a slow pace.
Yeah, it felt
a very slow burn.
It felt it this time.
So did you like it?
I did like it. There's a lot of interesting things to point out about it. And I can definitely, because I have heard notions of some people who got into the franchise later with, the second or third films, which are apparently much more bombastic. Again, haven't seen them.
And sexual.
Coming back to the first one and seeing like, oh, it's not quite, what they wanted. So it is interesting seeing something from the beginning not having, too much influence from what comes later.
Yeah. And
even just reading trivia of like, oh, this is the only Mad Max film that has a shot of the ocean or things like that. It's like, oh, wow.
The only one without a voiceover narration to end the film as well.
Okay.
That becomes a staple of them.
Yeah, this film just ends.
Yeah, no, it just ends where it needs to. He's completely consumed at the end. We'll get into the grander legacy of the other Mad Maxes a little later, but I like the film a lot. It's not my favorite Mad Max by any means, but I like it in general, and I think it is often overshadowed because you really do just want what people's perceptions of the Mad Max movies are, which are different to the Mad Max movies. So, for instance, like you said, many people, not just yourself, but like many people went into Mad Max Fury Road expecting Mad Max to be the main character or the main focal point, and he would have lots of lines of dialogue and he would do actiony things. That's never the Mad Max movies. The Mad Max movies, he barely, in the sequel, Mad Max 2, the Road Boy, he has 16 lines of dialogue in the entire movie.
Oh, that's like Terminator 1, Terminator.
But he's the main character, kind of.
Yeah.
And in Fury, and in the other movies, there's no Furiosa equivalent. It's just kind of he walks around from place to place having things happen to him and he gets swept up in other people's stories. And this is what I like about this one is there is an emphasis on character things, but the structure of the movie I find super fascinating. It doesn't fully work, but this is a clear example of an early filmmaker having an idea and trying to explore it with no budget and no full understanding of how to do story structure. But I really do like this idea and the way it's done in a way where the first half of the movie, Max is kind of in it. He's kind of there, but we're focusing on Goose and the gangs and the other things to really set up how dangerous and morally depraved the world is. And that once Goose gets his bad ending, the really horrific burning of Goose and the whatever Max sees of his body, that brings Max into the story. That this other protagonist character gets wiped off the map. It is, you know what I'm saying by that? Like,
yeah.
It reminds me kind of video games in weird ways in that manner, where in some video games, like I'm playing the Nier games, where you start off as one character and you're like, this is the journey I'm on, la 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 la, and then you'll just get wiped off the map and now you're another main character. Now you're the real protagonist and you may not have known that. And so Goose is I like that idea in the movie. I don't think it all comes together, but I like this idea that there's the only good cop, like the only good person, Goose, because he's like morally outraged and he has convictions and he seems like a good enough dude, but then he gets a horrific ending that's a warning to Max to leave, and Max then proceeds to escape and leave, but he can't. He gets dragged in anyway, and then he doesn't get the bitter ending that Goose does, but he gets in a way you could argue, an even worse fate of he's lost everything and now he has become as evil and as corrupt and as insane as the people that have taken all of that away from him.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy story. But I do think that my appeal to the movie is that attempt at an avant-garde structure for a movie, because the usual structure of this movie is you just follow Max the whole time, and he goes back home to his wife who's playing saxophone, and you have all these intimate scenes of really hammering in that him and his wife and the baby are super cool, and they're gonna have dreams and desires and all of that stuff. But I like this attempt here to throw us a curveball and to really hold Max from us as the character, but it still gives us most of the a lot more characterization and stuff of Max out of all of these movies in the way that a traditional movie would. He has wants, needs, desires. He has fears in this movie, other than in the other ones where you know what he wants in those other movies? Gas. That's all he wants.
Yeah.
Can I just get gas?
What else does he have left?
That's all he got. And can I get some dog food for my dog? That's all he wants. That's all he wants in the other movies, but then other people fuck with him. And even then, he's not after them for revenge, but more, they took my car, I need the gas from my car. And those are great movies, but if you're looking for what made Max become this, and did Max ever actually care about the world, this is a good movie for that. I think it's really good to see a version of the Mad Max character that actually had hope and actually believed that things could work out, but was also aware that things were fucky enough to try and escape it. And then he gets the ending that he gets, in which you can't escape this. You're going to become a part of this. You are going to become the crazed road warrior with the badge, like you worry about.
You said a million things right there, and I had a million thoughts, and I have to kind of get it all together now.
I know.
You've already said the T word, the tragedy. That was also going to be a big thing that I was going to talk about. This film, when you really do break it down, it is quite poetic in a lot of ways, because you said that, you know, he has that ending, which is arguably more tragic. But even when you just focus in on Max's journey throughout the entire film, there is the poetic leading to that tragedy. Tragedy is like an inevitable ending. Max's mental motivation in the film is that he is dealing with so much messed up stuff that he is worried that it's going to take a toll on his sanity, and he's going to become, you know, just as bad as them. The hero is going to turn into a villain, and he's consciously aware of that, which is quite impressive, and he is trying to take steps to avoid becoming that. And he does take steps that, you know, on paper sounds like it is going to lead away from that, but the chains of fate do not want him to move away from that, and they push him into that tragic ending really hard, really brutally.
And with the brilliant way that the world building is done in the film, it really delineates that there are two types of people here: the perpetrators of violence and the victims of it.
Yeah.
And Max doesn't identify as either of those, but he has to become one of those in the end. And he's not going to be a victim of it. He is going to be the perpetrator of it, because is there anyone that you could identify as a noble character that actually gets that's okay in the movie? Because the closest I could get, other than Max himself, who gets a fucked up ending, is Fifi, his chief, but he's insane. Like, Fifi's kind of nuts.
Good fashion, though.
Oh, I want to get into him because in a moment, but all I'll say is when I watched the movie, I wrote in my notes, this is the role that Bartek would want to play. He had so many lines of dialogue that I'm like, Bartek would really relish having to go at those lines of dialogue.
For anyone who this is the first time listening to the podcast, Ryan is usually pretty good at picking favorite characters for me.
I know, right? Yeah. He had so many lines that I'm like, Bartek would relish saying these.
Look, just
you'd chew into those.
Look, him watering the plants shirtless with a tie was enough for me.
With a tie or scarf or whatever. Yeah. He's got his big bald head and he's got a big mustache.
It's perfect. Yeah.
But yeah, what else do you want to touch upon?
So another thing that you touched on, the world. And also when you mentioned the video game thing, because this isn't the beginning of, you know, whatever troubles has happened, it's like a little bit in. The film is pretty good at making the world feel already lived in. We're already kind of at a status quo of what this world is like. We've got the crazy hoons. the gang, who some of them are in prison, some of them are still out there, some of them are working to take them out of prison to go rejoin the gang.
Some of them are becoming martyrs on
Some
purpose.
of them becoming martyrs. We're having, like you said, victims being victimized, like just random people will get chased down, knocked down, or raped, essentially.
Or just intimidated as well.
Or intimidated.
Like the station master guy.
Yep. Or, mix of everything and then they go insane.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, okay, this is the world that this story takes place in. We're kind of in the middle of it. And also we're going to see the moment where, things take a huge shift for our main characters. So you mentioned Nier was your one that you thought of. The one that I thought of was more towards the Suda 51 end. He has the game Killer 7, which that game is separated into multiple chapters. And one neat little thing that he does in that game is that each chapter is numbered for, like, this is the mission of the group of main characters, and it starts at like 34.
Yeah.
And and throughout the game you have all these characters that are already dead, that they killed from previous missions, just talking to them, because when they kill people, their ghosts hang around. And it's really good at, like, getting this really lived in feeling, but it's also, because it's a game and it's telling a story, leading to a conclusion for this character's story.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I felt with this film. Max has already become, the great police guy. He gets relied on when he's needed. And we see, where it all leads to, essentially. It's not a full ending, but he does go somewhere new at the end.
Yeah.
And even in the sense that, like, the first we see of him is this kind of classic, actiony moment. Like,
the music swells, and you don't see his face, and then you do, and it's a big shot where it pans up, and that's what I just want to say too. For a low budget film, that when we talk about post apocalyptic stuff like Dead End Drive-In or whatever, and you think schlocky, but even back then, where George Miller had to pay people with beer, that's how he paid people sometimes. Stylish camera work. Like, it's a beautifully shot film.
Oh, yeah.
For what is a very, like, cheap, like, raw, grungy film. It's like those glory shots of the vehicles, or of Max, or even of Toe Cutter. You nod your head going, this is the guy that did Fury Road.
Yeah, and when you compare it to, a much more Hollywood film, the film I'm going to bring up is Tango and Cash, which we've done a podcast on.
Your favorite film.
Our favorite film.
Mm-hmm.
It's better than Oscar.
It's no movie 43.
Specifically, Sylvester Stallone's first scene, it's kind of similar in setup to this. There's a chase happening in the desert. The regular police are struggling to deal with it. Then our main character, comes into frame and he deals with it. We have a very similar thing happening in Mad Max, but it's done in a very different way. It takes a very long time for us to get to all of the Max parts of it. We've got this really long chase with like 4 police officers, 2 of which are kind of comic reliefy.
Even one of them gets like a horrific fate in the movie where they no longer have a voice and they have to use one of those. I can't remember.
I forget
the voice
as well.
modulating.
The Ned from South Park.
Yeah. Hello.
It's a really cool sound. It takes a while for us to get to that hero moment. And even when we do see him for the first time, we still have more of the other cops doing things. And then in the end, when Max does, get into his role of stopping the villain, it's more of just like, I'm going to follow you, and that's intimidating enough. So it's not even like a glorious, like, oh yeah, Max, he's the big hero.
One of the things that's recurring throughout these movies, I would say, and it's here, is we're saying hero shots or these glory shots, but they're done so bluntly and matter-of-factly, and because of the world building as well. The general, like, the thing that you can say about the Mad Max films is the world feels so defined in each one of them, even if they're not as consistent from film to film. Like, when you watch the film, you get it. You're like, I get what this is, the world. But they're not heroic. They're very depressing. There's this air of, like, yeah, this is a hero shot, but, like, his hero shot when we first see him properly, like, in full body image, is him sadly looking at the burning bodies of Knight Rider and his girlfriend and looking at it being like, again, this is what we've got.
Yeah, it's
just more death and destruction. It's not the Stallone thing where he walks in with his big magnum gun and his glasses and he's making quips or whatever. Mel Gibson and like a lot of Max things are just, he walks in and it's just this scene of death.
Yeah, it's more of like a...
He's more of a specter than a hero.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we've stopped them. What do we have to show for it? And it's just a body count of how many people died along the way or lost their voice or, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just violence. One of the things I love about George Miller, especially in the Mad Max movies, now that you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, so you can attest to this, you can see it here. And you see it in full form in Mad Max Fury Road, that George Miller is so evidently wanting to make a movie with little to no dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And he just wants it to be the visuals and the action and not just the action scenes, but the actions characters take. And this has lots of dialogue, of course, but you can tell that the guy wants to be able to tell these stories with as little dialogue and just as visuals as possible and see if you can get away with it. And for a film of this era, it's still striking how that's trying to be achieved. And then when you watch Mad Max Fury Road in the age of the Fast and Furious and the age of where we've had all these quippy action movies, that movie, like, you don't remember much of the lines of dialogue. It has memorable quotes and all that, but like what you remember is the visuals of the movie and how he could communicate these things by how to frame a car in the shot and how to have the characters barely exchange any words, just looks at one another. And it's so crystal clear, to me at least, when you look at this first Mad Max movie, that this is something that's interesting to him. And he's trying to scratch at it here, but he can't get there yet because this is first, early time filmmaker.
There's for anyone who hasn't seen the film, there is plenty of dialogue, but there is also a sense of like, they don't want that to be too much of the thing that's driving the emotions.
And
or
it's
whatever.
very minimalistic dialogue in a way where the dialogue is direct. It is, this is the point, and it's not flowery dialogue. The most flowery you get is Toe Cutter.
I was about to say, like...
And that's what makes him a fun villain to me.
Yeah.
And the villains in the Mad Max movies often have flowery, eloquent dialogue, or kind of... It is performed that way for the juxtaposition of Max being, I just want fuel.
You were telling me that in last week, that Road Warrior, like the villain is very polite, apparently?
Yeah. Lord Humongous is this huge, bulking bodybuilder guy with a hockey mask, and he's just in a leather jock strap with a megaphone, and he's very much... Please give me the gasoline. I do not want to hurt any of your men, but if you don't, we shall have to unleash my dogs of war. Please, Max. And he's very, very polite, but he's like a scary motherfucker. And even Toe Cutter.
I was about to say,
He's creepy. Oh, do you want to hear a fun fact about the actor of Toe Cutter? So I said that he played Immortan Joe, but would you be shocked to find out that he played Eddie in Rocky Horror on Australian cast for the stage show? He played Eddie, which was Meatloaf's character in Rocky Horror, the delivery boy who sings with the... You remember that character at all?
A little bit.
The one who comes out of the cryo freezer and he gets hacked to death.
A little bit, yeah. I have to watch it again.
He plays Eddie. He played Eddie, I should say.
Our friend Stefan interviewed him at a convention once.
Which is awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But I just want to kind of circle back. We'll get to the villains because they're very fun. But this is your second time visiting it. You mentioned that this was a lot slower paced for you than you did recollect. Did you find that to be a hindrance, or did you find it to be in the favor of the film?
I think it's to the favor. Because obviously I only remembered little bits of, like, obviously there was Max, there was the main villain, and there was his wife and his child. And those are the four characters that really stuck in my head. So the fact that there actually is quite a big cast in this film, which I thought was incredibly short, was really cool. And like, I didn't remember Goose at all. I didn't remember Fifi or any of the other cops at all. The lady at the farm and her farmhand. It was just really interesting because, the visual looks of these characters also tells us a little bit about the world. Like, some of the Hoons look a bit, rough and crazy, and that's really in contrast to how clean Toe Cutter is for a name like Toe Cutter. Like, this guy is so clean, and he contrasts his group so well.
Well, him and his right-hand man.
Him
they're
and his
both very,
Bubba something.
Yeah. They're both very punk looking, but they're very they're a lot more sharp than the others in the visuals as well as just their performances. I also love with the pacing of it. It being a bit slower than a regular movie, especially of. Would you consider this an action film? I know the other ones are, but
the climax, yes, but
there's lots of driving around and car stunts and bike stunts. It's a stunt movie for sure. People nearly die making this movie.
I think you got stunt awards. So
and so it's slower paced. It really, really soaks you into how fucking miserable this world is. This bizarro version of the world that they live in, where I don't even know if this is supposed to be Australia, because they're all doing weird accents throughout this movie too, which is very funny. I mean, on purposely, the actor of Toe Cutter, every scene he's in, he's on purposely doing a different accent to really emphasize how unreal and deranged this character is, which I think was very effective. I think it actually works. But it just, this slow burn really gets you at this point where once the gang finds his wife and the baby, you are just dreading it because you've seen them just fucking murder and rape and rob and do all of these horrible things, especially, like I said, with Goose earlier, which is very funny that you said you don't remember Goose, because when I first watched this, the thing that I really remembered was Goose being burned alive and the burned hand coming out and the whole entire hospital room thing where you're like, what is he now? What is this thing?
It's certainly going to be more memorable for me now, yeah.
Yeah, and Mel Gibson's reaction to it and the shock of it and the music swell.
That's not the Goose.
Yeah, whatever that is. It's no longer a person, it's a thing, it's a creature. That's not Goose. That's not the Goose. I don't believe it. I remember Goose very strongly because of the horrific ending, which I'm going to say it. I even though the wife and the kid get murdered at the end of this movie, I don't think anyone gets it as bad as Goose in any of these fucking films. He gets it pretty bad. It's very memorably horrific. And what was that like for you on the revisit of how bleak and nihilistically violent and just gross and torrid the world of Mad Max is? How did that feel for you when you were revisiting it? Because that's something that most people remember, but that's not one of the things that you brought up in your memories of it as much of like, oh, you remember these things. But how was it to actually come back and see? Is it as tawdry or as like depressingly violent as I'm saying it is, or is it different for you?
I guess if I were to think about what I might have taken from it the first time round, it might have just been focused on like, oh, the gang of villains were the center of all the badness in the film. Mm-hmm. Not so much, whatever other elements in the world there were or what other people looked like. Like I said before, you can gather a lot from, character design or costuming. So definitely this time around, I could see it in a lot more of a general sense. Yeah, just people's attitudes. It's just reflective of the world that they're from. Obviously, the gang are the, source of all the violence we see in the film.
A lot of violence. A
lot of the police as well.
The police are pretty violent as well. And this is a movie where people just have weapons on them for the most part.
And then you also had like the little sort of joke of like, oh, there's a courtroom scene and the lawyers for the villains are still kind of like these cartoonishly whingy, annoying lawyery caricatures.
I love how weird the Mad Max movies are, including this one. There's this one scene, I don't even know what this was. I can't remember the full context, but Fifi's talking to this guy. Do you remember this? He's talking to this weird little Weasley guy with, like, I think he had a mustache and he was like in a suit, but on top of his suit, he had like a vest of some sort, and it was like, what is this vest? And then the guy gets up and he goes down to the stairwell and he puts on a fencing helmet on top of his head and he's like, goodbye. And I'm like, what the fuck was what was this?
Well, I forget the helmet, but I remember the scene.
Yeah, but he puts on a big like sword fighting fencing helmet thing on his head and he walks out. I'm like, why is this happening, George Miller? Could you come back to this in one of the other movies, please?
Yeah, and Happy Feet.
Yeah, and Happy Feet. Are you a fan overall of the post-apocalyptic genre? I know this isn't technically post-apocalyptic. The world is dying in this movie, but the Mad Max movies are very influential in that sphere. How are you with that in your media, whether it be video games or shows or movies or books?
In general, I've enjoyed the post-apocalyptic stuff I've done. A lot of things I've played with it. In my mind, I'm thinking on a lot of manga and games I've played. Maybe not so much resembling this kind of punky aesthetic, but in general, it is an interesting setting to explore because there's just so much you can do with it. So it is always nice to see, different interpretations of it.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it overall as a genre, and I mentioned this in our Dead End Drive-In conversation. I wasn't a fan of that movie either.
Yeah, you're asking if was this worth it?
Was Mad Max worth it? Because that's that's a whole topic to talk about. Is Mad Max worth the shit that came out after it? Because it was a cheaply made movie that was really successful. So, of course, you're going to have Roger Corman and all these fucking B-movie schlock filmmakers try to rip off that and get a profit. And it just flooded the market. And not just movies, but in many things, such as you watch a Mad Max movie now. And okay, think about this. Say you're a teenager now. You're a teenager and you're still you're a gamer. Right, because you're into games. You're a teenage gamer and you watch Mad Max movies and you go, oh, that's silly. I've already played Borderlands. Right? Because Borderlands just is ripping off, Borderlands is just the Mad Max movies.
Yeah, I think that one is more inspired by Mad Max.
It's clearly just Mad Max movies. But, these movies are so long ago that people, dumb like that. But it's also, there's so direct influences that there's very little separating it. And I wonder if Mad Max, even though this film I would say is flawed, it's in a way so crystalline in what it is that the people who take inspiration from it most often than not just replicate it and just change the names around or add dick jokes or make it more rapey or gross or whatever. And I often wonder when I watch the trilogy of Mad Max movies, I go, I like Mad Max movies, but I don't know if I can tolerate the fact that it really spawned a whole bunch of shit I really hate. I hate the Borderland games, by the way. I hate them.
I've never touched one, but yeah.
I played the first one and I hated it. It was the villain who looked exactly like Lord Humongous, and then the text would come on the screen saying, he has 3 testicles. I'm like, okay. So can I shoot him in that third one? No, you can't, man. That would be fun.
So for some common ground, do you see much of Mad Max in the Nier games?
No, the Nier games feel more a response to, and this may be me reading into it because it is a Japanese-made game, more a response to the fact that Japan has been bombed twice by nuclear weapons, such as how Godzilla is a response to that. So I look at that more in that light rather than the genre itself, more taking inspiration from the real horrors of the world and applying it into the game. And also, those games are clearly someone has read a lot of philosophy books and they're going to put them in there as well.
Yeah, I think maybe with that whole thing in mind, since I consume a lot of Japanese media, so a lot of the post-apocalyptic stuff I've seen would be more in line with that. Maybe that's why I've got a bit of a different view.
You've got a bit of a different view.
So that makes Dead End Drive-In a bit more fresh for me,
yeah,
I guess.
Exactly. But I want to talk more about the movie Mad Max. Okay, I've talked a lot about the Goose stuff and that setup. What was that? How did you feel about that? Because you've forgotten about Goose, but how was it that setup? Did that work for you? Did you see what the attempt was there? Did you agree with my interpretation of the attempt was there? Because it is a very different way to structure a movie.
Yeah.
To have basically the first 30 to 40 minutes follow somebody else completely.
This film's called Mad Max, not Great Goose or anything like that. But like I said, lived in a world. These are all the characters that we meet are characters who have their history, and we may not know, the biographical details of it, but through the way they act and the way they interact with people, you get a sense of who they are. And the fact that in this story, you see a lot of these characters' downfalls, their ends, or, what their future is going to be in Goose's case, since he doesn't die, it does lead to that whole bleak feeling of wow, just bad things can happen to anyone. Yeah. And this character who was so animated and will now be memorable for me, as he was memorable for you, and I'm sure for many others, even he is not immune to any sort of plot armor or anything like that. He is in trouble.
Yeah, and that applies to the villains as well as the heroes, and that's what makes the Mad Max movies cool.
Yeah, even though, before he gets burned, he does go through a few accidents and comes out pretty all right. Like,
he lands fine. It's tall grass.
Yeah.
It's tall grass. I love Toe Cutter. He's my favorite villain in all the Mad Max movies. Morton Joe is pretty good. Lord Humongous is fun, but not in it enough. And I like Tina Turner in Beyond Thunderdome, but also she's kind of not in it enough either. I don't know. Beyond Thunderdome's its own beast, but I like Toe Cutter. I love how eloquent he is. I really do. I can't not think of his scene where he grabs the guy by his face with his fingers, and it's very awkward, but also it's very, I don't know, intimidating and scary, and he's like calmly speaking to him. It's a classic villain who's speaking ever so calmly to you. He doesn't need to shout, but then he'll do weird things like at the end when Max is going after him, he'll just look at him and then just go and then go off, and it's just oh, okay, he's unpredictable. And that gentlemanly quality, you can tell that this is an actor who had a little bit of a Shakespearean background. But I find him the most memorable villain because he does a lot. He does a lot in comparison to me, other Mad Max villains. He affects Max more directly in the plot because he does kill his wife and kid. And he has a very memorable look to me. The other ones are cool, but they are... One's a mask. Another one's who's played by this guy has a mask on too. And then the other one's Tina Turner. And so, I don't know. I find also out of all the villains, he's the character who's allowed to be performed the most. The other ones, it's more their physicality, but this guy's allowed to have the physicality as well as playing around with dialogue and really inhabiting a person or a character. The other ones, they're cool, but they don't have that edge to it like Toe Cutter does for myself.
Yeah, you say that he does a lot. I kind of was looking at it from the opposite sense of, you get a really strong idea of what his gang is. Like the whole beginning of the film, it was just the Knight Rider guy and his girlfriend, and he's absolutely insane. He's saying all these very quotable lines. And then when you see more of Toe Cutter's gang, they're a lot more, crazy or impulsive, things like that. They all have their different eccentricities, like the blonde guy, the Bubba.
Yeah.
What's it? He's a bit more, serious, talky. Then you got some crazy ones. You got what's his name? Jimmy or something?
Johnny the boy.
Johnny the boy, who's a bit more, weaselly and like twitchy.
Yeah.
And then
he's a piece of shit. He gets a great ending though.
Yeah. And then like you said, Toe Cutter is eloquent. His face is very clean. He speaks very clearly, and his words strike you very hard. He changes the accent a bunch. And it's just like, if this guy is in charge of this gang that does all this stuff and he seems to be a bit more, literate and eloquent, what sort of facade is he putting on? What sort of things is he capable of?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was going for with when I was watching him. Like, oh yeah, I don't know what this guy actually can physically do, but I imagine it will be very horrifying.
Yeah, it's true. The first Mad Max movie introduces many staples to the franchise. One of them being when villains die, you get a really close-up shot of their eyes bugging out of their head right before they get hit by something. That's a staple.
Yep.
That happens in most of them, if not a good portion of them, is you get a shot of close-up on their eyes as they go red and bug out of their head while they realize that they're going to get fucking killed. I love that in these movies. It's very cheesy. It's very fun. If you see more, you'll notice it. Toe Cutter is just a fun character to me. The movie's got fun characters. I like Johnny the boy. He's a piece of shit. Where in another film, he could be the reluctant gangster guy who's pushed into doing bad things, and he's actually secretly good. No. He's just a garbage person who needs to die as well. And Max doesn't give a shit about him. And at the end, like when Johnny the boy is giving all of his rationales for why he's doing bad things currently, You really sell, no, he's not good. There is no, that typical script writing facade, that little trick of the innocent, young, fresh-faced gangster boy who's actually good, but he's being brought in by peer pressure to do bad things. No, he is just garbage. So when Max makes him handcuff his own foot to the thing and lets him decide to hack his own foot off or hack through the handcuff, and then the trick is he doesn't even have enough time to do either, and he just dies. And Max just drives off, just completely stone-faced. He doesn't even have satisfaction in the guy's death. He is just crazy.
Yeah, explosion, no reaction, credits.
It's a great way to end the film. I know it's like it ends, but some movies just need to end.
Yeah, well, I don't think Max is looking for a silver lining. I think the whole idea is, he's become a monster in a sense. Yeah.
He's a monster. He's a shell of a man. I love Mel Gibson's acting once he becomes Mad Max. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't mind it when he's just Max, but the scene of him waiting outside the hospital room, hearing them talk about his wife and kid, and
he's just standing there like a zombie.
Oh yeah, but also like an animal panting. Oh. We haven't talked enough about like the cars and the stunts and the fighting, which is a large portion of why people come to these movies. You and I are not car guys.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I couldn't tell you a car model.
But this movie less so than the other ones. But this movie does have Max's car. I get it. Yeah, when I watch a movie like this, I get that sense of fucking run him down with your car. Yeah, rev the car. I want to see the engine burn.
With me, it was like, they're like, oh, it's got a V8 engine. I'm like, that's a thing people like.
Clap, clap.
Yeah.
Come on, his car's cool, though.
It is, yeah. It's got the metal thing on the hood.
Yeah.
Is it obvious that I don't know cars?
But it's cool, right?
Motor, I think. Yeah, it is.
It is cool. It is cool. I can't remember if it's a real one or it's a replica that's in one of in the ACMI Melbourne Museum.
There was something like
big Mad Max car.
I was thinking there was something like that at Fed Square.
Yeah, and no, the car stuff in this is done well. Again, we've got to remember that this is a guy making a film on a shoestring budget. He's having to get cars brought in. He's having to get all these things done. He's having to get old cars that are decommissioned and having to smash them up. And people are risking their lives making this movie. Like, people are like mounting themselves on cars moving to hold. Like, this is dangerous stuff. This is real guerrilla filmmaking happening. And yet the technicals of the movie, when you look at it, you can tell it's a lower budget film. But yet the technicals of the movie are so slick that I'm not thinking that this is a guerrilla. I'm not thinking that this is a Who Killed Captain Alex level movie.
Yeah, again, one of the other things that when I said I was thinking of a million things earlier was El Mariachi, which I know we didn't do that on the podcast.
We did Desperado.
I watched it for Desperado, and obviously I talked about it a bit there, but that was also a film that was like, shoestring budget, really good film, and, it's one of the success stories of low budget films.
Yeah.
And it was interesting knowing that these two films were the same in that respect, but they feel so different. Like, you don't really think about a lot of the limitations because it is made so well. And I didn't know about the fact that people risk their lives to make it.
Oh, yeah.
But in the scene where Johnny the boy throws the thing onto Goose's car and it smashes in the window, and I was like, oh, that was really accurate.
Yeah.
I was thinking like, I wonder if they had a guy on top of the car, like just smash it into the windscreen. And then I dismissed it, like, no, that would be ridiculous. But from what you're telling me, that maybe that is what they did.
Yeah. There's at the very end, here's a very funny moment, and once you know it, you won't unsee it, unless you already saw it.
Yeah.
They wanted a big truck, which they get, to destroy a bike, which has a toe cutter on it.
Yeah.
But the guy who owned the truck agreed to do it, but he didn't want to do it because he didn't want to damage his truck. So if you watch the movie, they made a giant metal shield or barrier in front of the truck and painted it to look like the truck.
Okay.
So that's what hits the bike, and the truck is fine.
So is it
once you know that, you will see that they painted lights that are on, even though it's day.
So is it like a two-dimensional? That's
but it's shot from front on.
Okay.
You can tell once you know, and if you're a keen-eyed viewer, but you didn't notice, it just happens like that. But that's the level of it reminds me of Ed Wood, the film, where excuse me, Mr. Wood, but where's the cockpit? And then, while he's saying that, they're building it around him. It's like, you're standing in it, and he looks and he's in it. It's that we're putting a film together, and we talked about that last episode.
I was about to say, yeah.
With that there's a sense of community here, and the sense of people who really, really want to make a movie, and they're doing the best that they can with what they've got. While with trauma films, they're wanting to make fun movies with what they can do. This isn't, I want to make a fun movie. It's, I really want to tell a story. I really want to explore this gritty world and have these car stunts and just do all this. Like, they had no filming permits. They are filming in Melbourne, outer Melbourne, and Victoria.
I was about to say,
like
one of the only trivia points that I ever remembered about this film is that they filmed 2 of the scenes where the V8 car was at, like, the Melbourne University car park.
Yeah. And they didn't have permits or rights, but they had such a sense of community. Like, they were real bikers, like outlaw bikers, a part of the gang that were a part of the film, and they had to give them little notes. No joke. They had to give them little notes, which is referenced in the movie, to ward off the cops saying that they were in film production. So in the movie, Goose gives these 2, like this bike guy with his girl in the sidecar with like the little bubble, like glass dome that she puts over her head. He gives her a note and he winks, and it's like it's a little joke.
Yeah.
For the filmmakers saying like, give this to, if you pulled over, give this to a cop. It's a get out of jail free card. They had to give that to the bikers.
Right.
Because these are real bikers and they're carrying fake weapons on their bikes and stuff.
Mm.
And so they would get pulled over from the cops. It was like real life bigotry, I guess, towards the crew of this movie, because some of these people, some of them with like the peroxide blonde hair and the punk outfits, or the bikers, or even the crew members, would go to places and they would be chased out of town or chased out of the place because they weren't welcomed. The classic, I think one of the punk guys, maybe Bubba, he went into a restaurant, they kicked him out because we don't serve your type here, because he looked like a fucking freaky punk biker dude, and people are scared of those. So that's a thing. But there's also this sense of community, because people became aware that these guys were making a movie and they wanted to be a part of it and help them and do all that. Where the police found out that they were doing this, and they just kind of sectioned off roads for them to do stuff. So this became a real group effort, and it's not just George Miller just had a camera and did a really good job. It's like we've got stunt people, we've got people bringing in cars, we've got people, real bikey gangs and all of these things. And you can kind of feel that in the movie, that people care about this. Mel Gibson wasn't even supposed to be in the movie. You know, he didn't even audition for the film according to the IMDb. He went with his sister who was auditioning to be in the movie, and he had been in some kind of fight or accident, so he had like this real like bruised head or whatever, and they said, hey, could you come, like, do you want to be in the movie? We need more freaks. And so he came back a couple weeks later, and they didn't recognize him because he looked normal, and then he had to actually audition. And so he got the part of Max. He wasn't even initially supposed to be in this as Max. So
yeah, wow.
there's those kind of things where it's really fun, and there's a plethora of trivia I could go through. That's just more and more stories like that of, you know, George Miller taking these experiences from his life, seeing many people who have survived or been in car wrecks and accidents and stuff on the roads, and he's putting that into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he's wanting to have that there. And also not knowing how to do stunts. In the second film, when we do cover it, you'll see it. There's a stunt in that movie that you see it on camera that went wrong, and the guy fractured so many fucking bones and broke so many bones in his body, and he could have died. And it's one of those where you see the stunt, and the guy, you can tell he misses where he's supposed to go and his feet get stuck, and he does like a pinwheel spin in the air, and you, the audience, go, fuck me, that's a great stunt. Stunt gone wrong. But it's in the movie because that's the take you get.
Yeah, you're gonna waste that.
You're not gonna waste that take. And yeah, I what I like about the Mad Max movies is it is the descent into the bad part of ourselves. Max descends. It's a tragedy story, and we just see the world do that as it goes along. The trilogy I would describe as this one's dying. The world is dying. People are dying. It's a decaying world. The second one is just death. That's how I describe it. It's just everything's fucking dead and miserable. Max has no shred of humanity. He's just this monster, lifeless monster, who's just going from scene to scene. And then the third one is kind of rebirth. The world is building back up again. And then, well, Fury Road is a redo. in the most perfect of ways, because you brought up a little while ago that there's a scene near the end where there's this tanker and the guys go onto it and they're taking the petrol out of it, and there's people pole vaulting onto it and motorcycles going up to it and people jumping on it. And it's done very matter of fact here and very rudimentary. It's not at all flashy or exciting here, but I can't help but think about how George Miller likes that idea and likes these things, and he keeps putting them in, because one of the things that many people remember about Fury Road is those guys on the massive sticks that pole vault from thing to thing, and how people just jump on the tanker in that movie and just leap and bound and all of that. So this is clear that there are things here that he wanted to do better. And that's why Fury Road's a great movie, because it is one of the few movies in which somebody who actually was the person who made the movie has said, I could do that better. And they actually managed to do it better and bigger. But
yeah, you just said it.
Bigger and better. But it doesn't wipe out the quality of those original films. Like, we can still watch those, and maybe when you watch The Road Warrior is... Fury Road is almost just a remake of The Road Warrior. There's some differences, obviously, but The Road Warrior is very much how much of the movie can be Max and co drive that way and the villains are after them.
Yeah,
which is Fury Road. And unlike in Fury Road, they just don't turn around and go back.
Yeah, well, with the whole petrol siphoning scene, and also Johnny the Boy throwing the tank lid and smashing the windscreen, those really interested me because, damn, they were really accurate. Like, it really shows you these characters' actions. They didn't mess up at all. They got exactly what they wanted to get done. And it just shows you, like, these guys are experienced in this thing. And again, it tells you that's how messed up the world is. They've been doing this long enough to that it is, as you said, matter of fact.
Yeah, and with all of these movies, you have it here. There are characters where they don't even have names. They are just the thing that they are. The station master, this guy, and they have weird names and they're just a thing. That just becomes amplified as the trilogy of movies go on, and then the Fury Road goes on. I really do. I commend that George Miller had this germ of a thing, like these germs in his brain, these ideas. And as his film career's gone on, he just wants to keep ramping them up and bringing them to fruition. How much of a movie can I just not have dialogue in it and just world build, just visual cues of world building? That was one of the great things that people love about Fury Road, is so much about Immortan Joe and his entire plethora of war boys. You get the knowledge of it from just visuals. You go, okay, you can deduce these things from what you're shown. And that is present here. But he's learning. And as somebody who's seen the other movies, when I go back, I do really get something out of that. It is when you revisit or look back at the early works of a beloved filmmaker, and you can tell that they're figuring out their watermark, their style. Such as if you went back to an early Stanley Kubrick movie, which we've done a couple of Stanley Kubrick movies, you can tell, okay, he wants to really do these center shots, but he can't do them as much as he will do in the future because the times are different. The way of making movies are different. The limitations, or just their own ability to do so, just hasn't come to that point.
We might be saying similar things at my next pick, but we'll wait 2 weeks for that.
Oh, I'm excited. But I like this movie. It's not perfect. I do think for myself it's a little too slowly paced. I wish that I cared about the wife and kid more than I do. They are just... They're a woman and a kid, don't you care? That's kind of the amount of efforts I put in. I mean, I know she plays saxophone. That's like character building, but...
They matter to Max, and in a less characterized sense, more objectified sense, I guess that's their purpose.
Yeah. I feel like there's more to talk about. Honestly, I feel we can hold off when we do the other Mad Max movies. I will, over the next... however long, I will just every now and then I'll suggest a Mad Max movie.
I'm down.
I'm not going to do it each one of my turns in a row. There's some other movies I want to visit, but I'm keen to give them a go again because I love watching them. They're very mood piece movies for me, and the second one has a dog in it, and it's probably one of the best movie dogs I've ever seen in my life.
Better than Scooby-Doo?
Oh, that's a different thing, isn't it?
Okay.
And there's a genuinely great movie dog, and I have lots of fun information about that movie dog.
I guess last thing to point out is Max never technically quit, so Fifi's still waiting.
Fifi's still waiting. You love Fifi, don't you? I mean, I do want to talk about Fifi just to end it on, because Fifi is this fucking prick shit house. He's so big and tall, and he looks like he should be in the gang. He looks like no disrespect to the man, who's apparently still alive after having just done some...
Still watering the flowers.
He looks like a neo-Nazi. Like, he's got this big, bold, like, he just has this look. I loved when he's given Max, like, the big inspirational speech about coming back and all of that and giving it time. He's got that tie or scarf on, and his pecs are just, like, pulsating, and his nipples are, like, bulging out, and he's got, like, his big head, and his lines of dialogue are delivered with that faux kind of British sing-songy accent in a way as well, that older school Australian accent where we have the British inflection a little bit, where he comes across as a guy that's a soldier who's trying to lead me into the trenches. I don't know. I love Fifi. I think he's a very underrated character. I love that guy. And when I saw him, I said, that's the character Bartek would play.
Oh, if only I were that big.
I would love to play Goose. I love Goose. I think he's a fun character. But anything else you want to touch on?
I think we got it all. Is there anything else you want to touch on?
Two things. Music's great. Love the music in the movie. It's just one of those things where the music kicks in, you go, yeah. There's just this element of these movies really know how to capture the sense of masculinity, the overwhelming masculinity.
Oh yeah, that's another thing I just remembered. Yeah, so I just watched the film the one time. But I remember not too long after I watched it, in the media class that I was taking at school, we had a unit where we were talking about film genres or subgenre things. And the topic of, blokey films came up, and we all had to, watch one each. Can't remember what I ended up watching, but a friend of mine was like, "Oh, I don't know what to watch," and I actually lent him Mad Max. So I always think of this film as like, "Oh yeah, it's a really blokey film." Yeah.
The weird sexual stuff will get more so in the movies. This movie hints at, but the other ones go full hog of, and I don't know how. We'll see when we go with the movies. There's plenty to talk about, but the freaks are gay is a real thing in the other movies a lot. We saw that a little bit here. There was like a couple of thugs who would dance, and there was that kind of, they're clearly, gay or have something going on there that was played up. And that we played up.
They put the gun in Johnny the Boy's mouth.
Yeah, and that will be played up more so. In the second film, one of the lead henchmen is he has a twink boyfriend that has arseless chaps hanging on the back of his bike all the time. So we'll see more of that. The second thing and the last thing I really, really want to talk about is the poster. The Mad Max poster. The first poster is my favorite Mad Max poster. It's this glorious poster of, it should be Max, but it's technically Goose because the outfit is what Goose wears throughout the movie, but like Goose has a really awesome outfit of him on like a car or whatever, and he's holding the shotgun, and he's just in this awesome pose with this amazing artwork style done of that 70s era poster stuff. If you haven't seen it, I'll show it to you at some point, but it's my favorite Mad Max poster out of all of them. The other ones are fine, but that's the one I really love.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have seen it, but the way you described it does sound right, because again, for a lot of this film, it kind of is Great Goose.
Yeah. But that's it. I am very happy we talked about Mad Max. He got mad, and his name was Max. Is his last name Polish or not?
I think it's meant to be.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just want to double check. You're the Polish expert. We'll ask your mama.
My mama.
Your mama. She will know. Come back next week with homework. My mama. I think Max is Polish.
I think it ended with a Y. So
I wasn't too sure if that excluded him from the Polish community.
Yeah, that's a bit more Russian-y, but maybe George Miller's just a dum-dum. I don't know.
George, come back to us next week with Bartek's mum. They come hand in hand in the room.
How did this film...
skipping together.
So how did this film influence Happy Feet? Because I haven't seen Happy Feet.
Well, there was some dancing in the movie, and Happy Feet had some dancing.
I was gonna
between some gay penguins, evidently. I don't know. You would call them penguins.
Penguins, yes.
Penguins.
I was originally gonna pick Happy Feet as my next choice, just for a laugh, but
I've never seen Happy Feet.
Me neither. Yeah, but
it's an Oscar-winning movie, I do believe.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, but unfortunately, it's American Australian production. I don't.
So-
American film next time.
So you're gonna pick Surf's Up. It's competition where it was about penguins
Yeah,
who surf with Shia LaBeouf.
What country is that from again?
I have no clue. It's probably American.
Well, if it's American,
No, it's from Penguin Land.
Penguin Land.
Pingu. It's from the country that Pingu's from.
Penguin.
I always thought Pingu when I was a kid. I thought that was French. I thought they were speaking French. Instead, it's just gibberish.
Flashback to Ryan early in this episode. I was number 1 in my year level for French.
Yeah. But I was like, when I saw this, I was like 5. Give me a break. Didn't have French. I wasn't number 1 in French until I was like 15.
5. Jeez, I was wrapping my head around English.
Yeah. And now you have to wrap around Pinganese. So,
You mean French?
So it is listening people's recommendation for the next episode. We've poured through the list, and we have some recent recommendations that really tickle
Recent.
our
I put
fancy.
it on the list 5 days
That's
ago. Yes.
fine. So if you put yours on 2 years ago, sorry. Somebody on YouTube really wanted us to do the Are You There Yet movies. So we're going to do the first one, which is Are You There Yet? The second one is Are You Done Yet? Which we'll do at some point in the future, because I've seen the Are You Done Yet movie. Bartek has seen the Are You There? Are We There Yet movie.
Yeah.
Are we done yet? Are we there yet? So we're going to do Are We There Yet? Which has Ice Cube, returning actor Ice Cube. We love Ice Cube. He's been a staple to us. He's kind of the new Paul Giamatti, honestly. We love his smiling face. He's always so happy and upbeat.
He's got that very nice band, the NWA.
The NWA, yes.
The W stands for with.
Yes, it does. Thank you. So that is it from us. You can find us on the social medias of Facebook and Twitter, Spit and Polish Presents, where we will be posting things on there. And we're back. We're back in the swing of things. Let's continue it on. You can email us at where, Bartek?
spitandpolished@gmail.com.
That is correct, Mundo.
Past tense of polish.
You can rate and review us on whatever podcast hosting site allows you to do so. It is, of course, appreciated. If you do that, we would love it. Bartek would love to open up the podcast app that he uses and see a 5-star review sitting there that says, I like the one that has the name that sounds like how it is said, or whatever that phrase was. Oh boy. So that is that from me. But Bartek, pleasure as always. But you better run now, because I'm getting mad. I'm getting mad, not sad, and you may get handcuffed if you stick around here.
Well, I got mad earlier in the episode and I got over it, so you'll be fine. You'll be alright.
But I'm less sensible.
Okay, now
than
you're
you.
sounding sad. I think you peaked the audio there for just one little moment. That made me mad.